here with the inner ear structure is something what we call the bony labyrinth. The bony labyrinth, of course, comes with the membranous labyrinth and some fluids like the perilymph or the endolymph, but we'll get to that in just a moment. As you can see, I would divide it into three different structures. The shell-shaped structure here, the rings-like structure here, and then, I don't know how else to describe it, like this turd-like structure, kind of like this kind of ball or whatever you would like to call it, this kind of chunk of something. And that would be the third structure. On the left-hand side, let's take the shell-shaped structure because it seems to be the simplest. This is what we call the cochlea. So this is the cochlea. This is all dealing with the ear or hearing. Sorry, not just the ear, but hearing. And you can imagine if I cut this open, we have some ducts inside. Inside these ducts, we have a small representation of the scala vestibuli, the scala tympani, and the scala media, also known as the vestibular duct, the tympanic duct, and the cochlear duct, with just a tiny bit of the tectorial membrane. You can probably see it better in another model. But of course, we see all these axons leading to the cochlear portion of the vestibular cochlear nerve. One of my favorite structures is something we call the helicotrema. I know that some people will be like, hey, that's not how you pronounce it. I pronounce it how I spell it. So helicotrema, this is like the end of that little snail thing, the tip here. So if I were to unravel this and then make the kind of pull it apart and then get the end, that would be the helicotrema. So anyways, that allows us to hear, and that's the main structures there. The nice thing about these ducts is that the vestibular duct, or the scala vestibuli, begins at the structure over here, something we would call the oval window. As you can kind of see, it gets let in from here and then like travels down. So this is the oval window. Crazy. Why? Because it's called oval window because it's oval. And then it travels in the scala vestibuli, or the vestibular duct, and then kind of like makes a backflip and kind of folds itself, coming back through the scala tympani, and then it leads itself out through something we call the round window. And so there's a structure of what we call the round window. You can imagine every time I push in this little membrane, the round window, because it's filled with perilymph, bulges out. So it's kind of like a drum, you know, you push one side and of course the other side kind of pushes in and out. So you could kind of imagine the balance of fluid. We don't add fluid and we don't take away fluid. It's kind of like a sealed system here. And so that's the cochlea. The other part, this big kind of chunk-like structure here, allows us to do some beautiful things of like linear acceleration and kind of static equilibrium. But you can imagine this whole thing right here is what we call the vestibule, kind of like this big chunk. So that's kind of considered like the vestibule. And with the vestibule, it kind of divides itself with these kind of membranous labyrinth components. The one up top, I always think is called the utricle because it's up. So this is like something what we call the utricle. It has like a little endolymph sac. That's what this guy is, if you're wondering. Just a little sac of extra endolymph, kind of like a repository fluid. And then you get the saccule. There's one other structure that is not really shown. I wish I could kind of chip this away and then find like the macula. And the macula will be found down through here. So the utricle and the saccula. And then this allows us to have static or linear acceleration, as they have crystals inside called otoliths, or rocks, ear rocks, as you could literally translate that. The other one is these rings. You can imagine that these rings are called semicircular, not because they don't look like full circles, but because they're half circles, because they stop like halfway. So semicircular canals, you can imagine all these different ones with the semicircular duct be represented in the blue. We have three different ones, of course. We name them. As always, we have the transverse, or lateral, I'm sorry, the one that's traveling transverse is the lateral one. We have this one that's the posterior one, and then of course this one at top, this is called the anterior one. So we got the anterior, posterior, and then the lateral semicircular canals. So let's kind of review all these structures. Over here is the cochlea. This poop-like structure or chunk-like structure is called the vestibule. All these rings are called semicircular canals. The cochlea has different ducts. The pink one is the scala vestibuli, or the vestibular duct. The blue one, or green one, is the scala tympani, or the tympanic duct. The blue one is the cochlear duct, or also known as the scala media. And then, of course, you put this all together. This little tip is called the helicotrema. And then what leads into this is a window called the oval window, and then the round window. And then, of course, here we have the vestibule that does and holds our otoliths for static and linear acceleration. Here's the utricle, here's the saccula, and this is a little endolymph kind of pouch. And then there's a macula somewhere through here if I were to chip away that bone. And then, of course, you get these large huge structures called the semicircular canals. You have the anterior one, you have the posterior one, and you have the lateral one, allowing us to do rotational acceleration.